All right, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well on this Thursday. I'm Fox 35 meteorologist Laurel Blanchard, and today is a big day, especially we are nearing the start of hurricane season, but today was not only the opening of Epic Universe, but talking a little bit more in the weather headlines. Today, the NOAA seasonal outlook for hurricane season 2025 was released. So the two big players here, Colorado State University released their forecast back at the beginning of April, and now we have the NOAA forecast, and we're going to break down both of them, see how they compare, what are they looking at both separately and together, and also talk about the new things what we're looking at for the start of hurricane season, what's new that's going to be coming into the season of 2025, and of course getting you prepared. And we'll also take a look at some other things and some other forecasts that are going to be coming up the pipeline within the next couple of days, which is really exciting. So we are live here on Facebook. Doesn't look like there's any comments quite yet, but we do have Rick on YouTube. We're also on there as well. So definitely come on in, say hi. We'll break down all the forecasts, but if anyone has any questions, definitely write those in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from as well, as we break down hurricane season 2025 with our two outlooks that we have from Colorado State University and as of today, NOAA, which is amazing. So this actually gives us a really good idea of, as we're getting closer to hurricane season, a better view what we could be in for, as opposed to just a couple of weeks ago where there still were a couple of factors up in the air, but now we're starting to key in on a good prediction and a good basically forecast of what we can see coming up for the next couple of months as we near the start of hurricane season. So Rick from Long Beach, hey, how you doing? Brenna Jordan from Johnson City, hey, my old stomping grounds right there. I miss it there so much. And anyone from Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia area, a little bit later on, also Western North Carolina, will be actually touching in upon your area as well. So definitely tune in for that. A little bit later on, we'll really focus in on areas that are a little bit further inland that were impacted by Helene and the intense rainfall and the crazy amount of rain that fell across those areas. So we'll be talking about that as well. So Bria Jordan, definitely tune in for that. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But what I do want to focus here is right now we are 9 days out from hurricane season. So with that, let's actually really focus in on what we can expect for the season ahead. So the countdown's on. We are less than 10 days out. And I'm going to grab my clicker right here so we can actually go through this together. So 9 days is on the countdown. And as we take a look ahead, this is what we have for the next couple of months. So as we mentioned right at the opening, NOAA released their forecast at about 11:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. They released their outlook for the 2025 hurricane season. So we'll start off with what they're expecting first and foremost. Ultimately, they're looking at an above normal year for activity, so a little bit more busy than what we normally see, and we'll talk about those numbers in a little bit. But this is just a breakdown of the percentages of what we can see and what they were thinking for more activity-wise what we were seeing this season. So really not seeing a whole big chance of a below average activity for season, but as we take a look at ENSO, which we'll actually talk about in a little bit, which is the Eastern Oscillation, that's what we're going to be talking about. So the El Nino Southern Oscillation, that is a pattern that happens every couple of years across the globe, and this is what's actually going to play a very big role in what we're going to be seeing in the next couple of months, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But right now, 60% chance of an above normal year, looking at about a 30% chance of a near average year, and only a 10% chance of a below average year. So let's actually get to the numbers. This is what everyone has been talking about in the weather community for the past couple of hours. So here's the NOAA forecast for that. 13 to 19 named storms. So looking at a little bit above average. For hurricanes, looking at anywhere between 6 and 10 hurricanes, and for major hurricanes, looking at 3 to 5. And again, just a reminder, major hurricanes are category 3 or above, and we'll talk about the strength a little bit later on. So what we're seeing right here, again, a little bit above average. That's really what we were seeing in that last graphic with the percentages. And NOAA is about 70% confident with this forecast at the moment, which is actually pretty good odds. And we'll compare it to the 2024 season in just a little bit. So this is what we're looking at from the NOAA outlook, and we'll look back at the Colorado State University one in just a little bit. But from the press conference this morning and when they were releasing these numbers, this is where the main takeaways and what they were really looking at over the past couple of months as they were getting together this forecast headed into the 2025 hurricane season. So still above normal activity. However, big key part of this is that it's not going to be as active as 2024. Last year was so busy, especially with Helene and Milton slamming the Florida coastline just within 2 weeks. So as we take a look here, fingers crossed, forecasts as of right now are not predicting a season as busy as what we saw last year. So good fingers crossed right there. Curtis Cece, thank you so much for watching. And also Lee Ruffin, hi from East Tennessee. We'll be talking about that area in a little bit. So definitely make sure you stay tuned for sure. Talking a little bit more, again, focused in on the NOAA forecast. The Atlantic Ocean is already warmer than average during this time of year. And as we know, warm ocean water really intensifies hurricanes or allows them to form a little bit quicker, acting like jet fuel. But however, they're not as warm as they were last year. So that's good news right there, playing into the fact where we could not see a season as busy as what we saw last year. So that's also playing into that above average activity of what NOAA is expecting. And also forecasting weak wind shear. So wind shear ultimately is wind moving in 2 different directions in 2 different layers of the atmosphere. So with that, when you have more wind shear, hurricanes really can't form as easy. They almost tear apart as they're starting to form. So without that wind shear, some of those hurricanes can form a little bit easier, and that was one note that they really stressed on in the press conference earlier on today. Hi, Cheryl from Chicago. And wow, yeah, that's Milton was definitely a heavy one, so we'll definitely focus in on that. Kathleen Hay from Daytona. So more focusing in on last year, because again, Cheryl, you just mentioned Milton, and I see a couple people from Johnson City, Northeast Tennessee, Western North Carolina that are watching right now. So this message very much pertains to you. Last season, this is the NOAA Tropical Outlook from 2024, and they were pretty much right on the money. They called for 17 to 25 named storms, and there were 18. Hurricanes between 8 and 13, again, right on the money with that, with 11 actually turning out with the season of 2024. In major hurricanes, there were 6. And again, right within that range of 4 and 7. So this is a verified forecast, ultimately just adding to the credibility of how well NOAA does with these seasonal forecasts. So things are looking right for them to be right on the money this year as well. So, hey, that's what we're looking at from last year, just to give a little bit more of that credibility of how essential these NOAA forecasts are headed into the 2025 season. So, we've been talking about how this season is going to be busy, however, not as busy as last year, but those numbers are just a little bit above average, whereas last year they were well above average. So, the last time NOAA actually released a forecast where they were predicting below average activity was 2015. So we were talking 10 years of above average activity, and that definitely does have to do with the warming ocean waters and the pattern of which we're in, because we've been seeing those El Nino and La Nina patterns shift pretty quickly. So we're going to really start to see a little bit more of that coming into play as we take a look at this season. But not only was it talking about the forecast, NOAA actually spent a good amount of time talking about what is coming in new with their 2025 season, and it's some exciting stuff, especially for those who only speak Spanish or are bilingual, but however Spanish is your preferred language. There are going to be Spanish language products specifically for you that's going to be coming in with advisories and key messages on your NOAA website, so just make sure you're tuning into that. So that's what we're going to be focusing in on for a couple of new things that are coming out with NOAA in the 2025 season. For those who are watching from Northeast Tennessee, Western North Carolina, Southwest Virginia, thank you so much for sticking with me once I was there and then moved to here. This is going to be a great product for you if we do find ourselves in a situation similar to what we saw with Helene. So these new maps that NOAA is going to be coming out with, these are experimental maps. These are going to be new cone and warning maps that are together. So you'll be able to see the cone of uncertainty as well as all of the warnings that are going to be issued and are issued every single time there's a cone update. So with that, if you are in a further inland area, for example, western North Carolina, northeast Tennessee, those areas that were specifically impacted by the flooding from Helene last season, this is going to be a great resource for you. Again, if we do find ourselves in another one of those situations, the cone and warnings map are going to put both the warnings and the cone together, so you will be able to see, even if you're further inland, not directly on the coastline, if you're going to be affected by the winds, the rain, anything related to a hurricane. That's going to be a great resource for those of you who live further inland and not directly on the coast. If you are directly on the coast, rip currents were also a very big factor as of last year. So there's going to be a new map of rip current risks coming up with this season as well. And finally, as we do take a look, we have to talk about that new technology that's coming out. The hurricane hunters are going to be experimenting with a new radar on their aircraft vehicles. And if you watch our hurricane special coming up on Monday, you will be able to see that. So definitely tune into that. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Also, again, for those of you who are watching in Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, Western North Carolina, those areas that were extremely hard hit by Helene as it made its way further inland, there's going to be a new public product that's available on the NOAA website in your local National Weather Service office. It's a probabilistic precipitation portal. So it's an estimate and a model that you can access on your own, just logging onto your National Weather Service website and being able to see how much rain you could be seeing no matter where you are, whether you're on the coastline or if you're further inland. This is going to be a great resource in helping you also get prepared if you're going to be impacted either directly by the storm or by the remnants of the storm. So just make sure you are staying weather aware and using all of these products as we take a look at the 2025 season. So moving along, back in April, the Colorado State University Weather Service, they issued their tropical outlook for the 2025 season. And again, this was back in April. And here's what they were calling for. So again, a little bit above average, calling for 17 named storms, 9 hurricanes, 4 major hurricanes for this season. A couple of the big takeaways, they are calling for a higher chance of seeing a major hurricane landfall, looking at a 51% chance overall of seeing one major hurricane making landfall along some of the U.S. coastlines, specifically a 26% chance of landfall on the East Coast, 33% chance of landfall on the Gulf Coast. So this is just back to what we were referring to at the start of April, and we'll compare these two forecasts coming up in a little bit. There's also a 56% chance, according to the Colorado State University forecast, that there could be at least one major hurricane tracking completely through the Caribbean. So that's kind of making backing up a little bit to what we were talking about back at the start of April. Colorado State University is also looking at an above normal activity, but not as active as the 2024 season. The Atlantic, once again, a little bit warmer than average, headed into 2025 hurricane season, but again, not as warm as last year. So that's also playing into the factor of why we could see still a busy season, but not as busy as what we saw last year. And again, one of their main takeaways, we already touched on this, seeing an above average chance of either a U.S. landfall or Caribbean landfall coming up this season. So just taking a look, Colorado State University went a little bit more in detail as opposed to NOAA on all of the new technology that's coming out, the factors that they were looking at. Colorado State University really went into the history of why they were, the years that they're comparing from what we're seeing here, and the similarities of what we could see headed into this season. So these are some of the years that they're using as a reference, and most of these are either being cold neutral or transition years in the ENSO cycle, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But these were the results from that season. They're kind of all over the place, and that's exactly what we're kind of the mindset that we're going into this season, is that it could be quite literally average, or they could be a little bit above average, which is kind of what we're expecting headed into this season. But again, not as busy as what we were looking at in 2024. So that's a little bit of a good sign that we may not be as busy this year. This was their last year's forecast. Again, pretty much right on the money. A little bit high in some areas, but especially for major hurricanes. There were 6 major hurricanes in 2024 in Colorado State University. Right on the money with that, predicting back in April, their April forecast of last year was 6 as well. So they, again, just adding to the credibility of both of these two organizations. They do very well, and they're essential into the forecasting of what we do in order to keep you safe. So Colorado State University, they released their first forecast on April 3rd. They're going to be updating their forecast on June 11th, and we'll update it a couple of times as we take a look at the season ahead. So let's compare the two. So we talked about the NOAA forecast. We talked about the Colorado State University forecast. So Colorado State University calling for 17 named storms, 9 hurricanes, 4 major hurricanes, and that actually fits very nicely with what NOAA was forecasting earlier on today. So the NOAA forecast, just as a reminder, 13 to 19 named storms, 6 to 10 hurricanes, 3 to 5 major hurricanes. So Colorado State University and NOAA are pretty much on the same page that it's going to be above average for activity this season, however, not as busy as what we were looking at in the 2024 season. So again, average, just to put that into perspective, average, and this is back into looking back, I think to 1860, I believe. 14 named storms on average per season, 7 of them being hurricanes and 3 major hurricanes. So that's ultimately what we can expect headed into this year. So both of those forecasts really hit on that it's not going to be as active as what we saw in 2024. They're also expecting that it's going to be either approaching or at a neutral ENSO condition, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But also to really drive home the factors that they're both watching, both organizations are watching very carefully, is the very warm ocean water in the Atlantic, as well as the low wind shear, because again, the warmer ocean water acts as jet fuel, whereas the wind shear can tear apart hurricanes. So if you have too much of it, you're looking at a below average season, but if you don't have enough, those hurricanes can form a little bit more quickly. So that's what we're looking at right here from both of those forecasts, the main takeaways from both of those. So we mentioned a couple of times ENSO and looking at La Nina and El Nino for impacts there. So with the neutral phase that both of these forecasts have really been almost driving home, we really have to look at the Pacific Ocean for this. So when there's an upwell of warm or cold water, that can significantly impact us here in the Atlantic, because that actually drives the wind shear in the atmosphere. So when you have water that's warm or cold, that's really going to play a part in the wind shear, the activity of what we can see in the Atlantic Ocean. So here's, again, we're expecting either a near normal or near neutral ENSO cycle. So we're expecting water that's near normal in the Central Pacific, so right along the equator. This is where we really look at that water temperature right here. And that could lead to an average season, or if that water is a little bit cooler, an above average season, because that wind shear is so limited. So that's something that we're going to be watching very closely in the next couple of months. So now let's actually take a look at some questions that are being asked right now. Hey, Fred from Fruitland. Looks like we don't have anybody too new comments-wise on our Facebook page. Brea from Jordan again from Johnson City. I hope we don't get any more flooding. That was a very big impact, of course. Yes, I was watching that, and there was a lot of rain, 30 inches of rain in western North Carolina as the remnants of Helene pushed over the mountains. So again, those products that we were talking about earlier on, if we do find ourselves, or anyone, in a situation like we found in Helene, as the remnants were honestly moving over the mountains and kind of being wrung out, that's what we're going to be seeing coming up soon. And so fingers crossed we don't find ourselves in a situation like that. But that's ultimately what was happening. As the remnants of Helene were moving over the mountains, all of that rain just fell on one side of the mountain and basically just flooded completely Johnson City, Tennessee, Irwin, Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, as well as parts of western North Carolina. Asheville especially was completely almost flattened by those floodwaters. So yes, I very much hope we do not find ourselves in a Helene situation like we did last year. However, it still is a possibility. So those products, especially with the precipitation that you can find on your own, that'll be extremely helpful coming up this season. So to kind of wrap up, let's just take a look at some general information headed into this season. Just as a reminder, this is what we're looking at for the enhanced Fujita scale. This is what we were seeing. This is tornado intensity, excuse me. So for hurricanes, we really focus on the wind speed. So as that wind speed gets higher and higher, we see stronger and stronger hurricanes. So that's what we're going to be focusing in on for more of the categorization of those hurricanes coming up. But these are the 2025 storm names, starting the season off with Andrea and wrapping it up with Wendy. So you'll probably notice a couple of these names look a little bit familiar, and you'd be right with that. So as we wrapped up the 2024 season, a couple of the names were retired, and that being Beryl, Helene, and Milton, because of the strength and intensity, as well as the damage and unfortunately the deaths that these storms caused. So these will be reused in 2030, but again, these names are going to be used, and you'll notice that a lot of these names headed into the 2025 season look very familiar, and you'll be absolutely right with that, because these names were used back in 2019, and you'll notice one that probably is a little bit of an outlier, and that's because of Dorian. So Dorian was retired after the 2019 season, so that's why Dorian was retired, and that is subbed in with Dexter. So Dexter is the new D name coming up with this storm list name. So just a little bit of stats on Dorian. This was the strongest storm to hit the Bahamas, and there were hurricane warnings all along the west coast of, or the east coast of Florida, because as you can see, it basically skimmed right along Florida right here. So that's ultimately what we're looking at for general information coming up this season. But I do want to wrap up that there's one more forecast that you should definitely be looking out for, and that is the Fox 35 Storm Team forecast. And you will be able to see that right here. So I will take this up full so you can see it in all of its glory right here. Our Tracking the Tropics special, Brooks, TJ, Jessica, Noah, and I have put so much work into this, and we are so proud of it. I just saw part of it today, and it looks incredible. So make sure you tune in and watch this. This is Memorial Day Monday, May 26th at 7 p.m. Make sure you tune in, because ultimately this special was built for you. And if you have any questions after the fact, something that's really exciting is that after you watch the special on Monday, you'll be able to actually tune in to a live Q&A right here on Facebook, on YouTube, on our Fox Local app, and ask us your questions from 7:30 to 8 p.m. And Noah and I will be actively answering your questions that you have about the hurricane season ahead. And again, this is completely for you to make sure you're prepared, because ultimately this is exactly why we do what we do here. We have families here, we have pets here, we have people that we want to protect here, and one of those people are you here in Central Florida. So just make sure you are doing everything that you can in order to stay safe during this hurricane season, and this is a great way to start preparing and making sure you're prepared for the next storm that hits. All right, that is it for me here. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and Noah will be back tomorrow to get into a little bit more detail of what we can see for the hurricane season ahead. But make sure you mark your calendars for Monday at 7 p.m. for our Fox 35 Hurricane Special. Have a great one, everybody.